The morning at the central station began like any other. Echoes of rolling suitcases, overlapping announcements, and the rhythmic hum of countless footsteps on marble floors. Officer Mark adjusted his uniform cap as he walked beside his canine partner, Rex, a strong, disciplined German shepherd with sharp amber eyes that missed nothing. They had been together for over 5 years, their bond forged through silent nights of surveillance, high-risk patrols, and moments where instinct meant survival. To every passerby, they were just another officer and dog team keeping the peace, but both carried a quiet readiness that only years on the job could teach. As they moved through the terminal, the crowd thickened with the morning rush. Mark's gaze swept across faces, commuters sipping coffee, parents guiding sleepy children, tourists clutching maps. Rex trotted at his side, his vest labeled "Police" glinting under the fluorescent lights. Every few steps, the dog's nose brushed the air, picking up invisible trails of scent, reading what the human eye could not. Everything seemed normal, routine, predictable. Yet Mark knew from experience that danger never announced itself. It could hide in the unlikeliest faces, the smallest gestures. And today, that truth was about to reveal itself in the most unexpected way. It happened in a blink. Rex stopped walking, his body stiff, ears perked sharply forward. The leash went taut. Mark felt the sudden change immediately, a vibration of tension running through the leash like a warning wire. He glanced down. "What is it, boy?" he murmured, his tone calm but curious. Rex's amber eyes were locked on something ahead. Mark followed the direction of his gaze through the bustling crowd until he saw her, a small girl, maybe 7 or 8, clutching her mother's hand as they walked quickly toward the ticket gates. The woman wore a bright blue coat, her face composed but pale. She held the hands of 3 children, though only one. This youngest girl seemed hesitant, her small feet dragging as if she didn't want to go to anyone else. It was an ordinary family in a hurry. But Rex didn't see ordinary. His body lowered slightly, tail stiff, nostrils flaring as if reading a message written in fear. Mark noticed, too, the way the girl's eyes darted around the terminal, the glassy look in them, the nervous tremble in her lip. She glanced back every few seconds, as though searching for someone to notice her. Mark's instincts stirred. Something about her body language didn't match her mother's firm, purposeful stride. But before he could act, Rex took another step forward, a low growl rumbling deep in his chest. "Easy," Mark whispered, tightening the leash slightly, but Rex's focus didn't waver. Then it happened, the gesture that changed everything. The little girl, still holding her mother's hand, tapped her small fingers 5 times against the woman's back. The movement was subtle, almost invisible amid the chaos of travelers rushing by. 5 taps, a pause, then 5 more. Mark might have missed it entirely, but Rex didn't. The German shepherd froze, head tilted, every muscle alert. Mark frowned, eyes narrowing. He had seen signals before, silent distress patterns used by victims to ask for help without drawing attention. His stomach tightened. Could that be what this was? The girl's eyes met Rex's for a fleeting second. Something unspoken passed between them, a plea only instinct could translate. Her hand trembled, and she tapped again. Rex's reaction was instant. He barked once, loud and commanding, the sound echoing across the marble hall. Dozens of heads turned. The woman flinched, her hand tightening around the child's arm. "Is there a problem, officer?" she asked, her voice calm but trembling at the edges. Mark studied her face carefully. "Just a routine patrol," he said, but his hand rested lightly near his belt. Rex took another deliberate step forward, muscles tense, gaze unwavering. The air thickened. The crowd slowed, curiosity rippling through the terminal like an electric wave. Mark felt the shift, the kind that happens when something hidden begins to surface. Rex's growl deepened, not in aggression, but warning. He was reading danger the way only he could. The woman's composure faltered for a split second before she forced a smile. The girl's lip quivered, her eyes filled with silent tears she dared not let fall. Mark crouched slightly, his tone gentle. "Hey there, sweetheart. You okay?" The child opened her mouth as if to speak, but froze when her mother's grip tightened. The only sound she made was a small, stifled whimper. Rex barked again, louder this time, pulling the leash forward. The noise startled people nearby. Mark's pulse quickened. He knew his partner well enough to understand this wasn't a false alarm. He had learned long ago that Rex didn't make mistakes. The dog could smell fear, tension, even adrenaline. He could read patterns no human could. And right now, his every sense screamed that the child was in danger. Mark straightened slowly, his eyes locking on the woman. "Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to stop right there." Her smile vanished. "We're late for our train," she said quickly. "Please move your dog." Her voice cracked on the last word. Rex stood his ground, growling softly, the low rumble vibrating through the floor. "Ma'am," Mark said again, tone steady but firm, "please step aside for a moment." The woman hesitated, glancing toward the exit. Then, in a sudden burst of motion, she tried to push through the crowd, pulling the little girl behind her. Gasps echoed as people jumped out of the way. "Rex!" Mark shouted. The German shepherd launched forward like lightning, not attacking but blocking, cutting her path with perfect precision. His bark thundered through the station, freezing everyone in place. The woman stopped, heart pounding, eyes wide with fear. Mark rushed up beside them, one hand outstretched, the other resting near his holster. "Don't move," he commanded. The woman froze, breathing fast, clutching the child so tightly that the little girl winced. Rex stood inches from her, his eyes locked on hers, his growl low and steady. For a long moment, the world seemed to stop. Even the hum of the terminal faded. All that existed was a trembling child, a frightened woman, and the unwavering gaze of a dog who had already figured out the truth. The girl's eyes met Mark's again, wide and glistening with desperation. Her lips moved silently, forming two words he could barely read. "Help us." Mark's chest tightened. He looked down at Rex, who was now completely still, muscles coiled, waiting for a command. "All right, partner," Mark whispered. "Show me." He loosened the leash slightly. Rex stepped forward, sniffing the woman's coat, then circling slightly, nose working rapidly. He stopped near her bag and let out a sharp, deliberate bark. Mark's pulse raced. "Ma'am," he said calmly, "open your bag, please." "I don't have to," she began, but her voice broke as Rex growled again, a deep, warning sound that made everyone within earshot step back. Mark kept his voice level but authoritative. "Now." The woman's hands trembled as she slowly lowered the bag to the ground. The little girl's breathing hitched, her eyes darting toward the officers who were beginning to approach from across the hall. Mark knelt, unzipping the bag carefully. What he found inside wasn't a weapon, but something far worse. Fake IDs, several passports, photos of children, some smiling, others looking terrified. A small prepaid phone with its back taped shut. The realization hit him like a wave. This wasn't just a frightened family. This was a trafficking operation. And this little girl had found a way to ask for help without ever speaking a word. The crowd murmured in shock as backup officers moved in. The woman dropped to her knees, crying, muttering excuses Mark barely heard. He only saw the child, Lily, standing frozen, tears streaming silently down her face. Rex stepped beside her, pressing his body gently against her legs, a silent promise that she was safe now. The girl looked down at him, her tiny fingers reaching to touch the fur on his head. That simple touch said everything. She didn't need words. Rex had understood her long before anyone else could. AS officers led the woman away. Mark exhaled for the first time in what felt like hours. He knelt beside his partner, running a hand through the dog's fur. "You knew all along, didn't you?" he whispered. Rex blinked slowly, his amber eyes calm, steady, and knowing. In that moment, Mark realized the truth behind every instinct, every unspoken signal between them. Some heroes don't just follow commands. They listen to the cries no one else can hear. The terminal still buzzed with nervous murmurs as the crowd began to disperse after the tense standoff. The woman in the blue coat stood frozen, her face pale, her hands trembling as officers surrounded her. Rex remained locked in place, muscles taut, eyes focused, his every movement radiating control. Mark's pulse steadied as his training took over, but his heart was still racing with the weight of what had just unfolded. A few moments earlier, everything had seemed routine, but now it was clear that something dark had been hiding in plain sight. The little girl, Lily, stood silently beside Rex, clutching her stuffed toy against her chest as if it were armor. Her eyes darted between the officers and the woman who had pretended to be her mother. Every flinch, every breath, spoke of weeks of silent fear. Mark took a slow step forward. "Ma'am," he said firmly but not harshly, "I need you to step away from the child." The woman didn't move. Her jaw trembled as she shook her head. "You don't understand," she whispered, voice fragile but frantic. "We were just traveling. She's scared of strangers." The excuse fell apart mid-sentence, the words sounding hollow even to her own ears. Mark could see it in her eyes, the panic, the guilt, the truth clawing its way to the surface. Rex gave a low growl, not threatening but commanding, a sound that broke through the tension like a warning bell. The woman flinched. Her grip loosened, and Lily instinctively took a step toward the officer, her small fingers brushing the dog's fur. It was a wordless transfer of trust. Mark knelt to Lily's level, softening his tone. "You're safe now," he said quietly. "No one's going to hurt you." "Okay." She blinked back tears, but didn't answer. Instead, she looked at Rex, the dog who had heard her silent call when no one else did. Her lips quivered as she whispered something so faint it was almost lost in the noise. "He heard me." Mark's throat tightened. He looked at Rex, who sat still and steady, his tail unmoving, his gaze locked protectively on the girl. The other officers were already opening the woman's bag. The sound of the zipper slicing through silence echoed louder than any shout. Inside were documents, folded clothes, and, beneath them, a bundle of passports. Each bore a different name, but the same face, the woman's. There were photos, too, blurry pictures of children taken from distances, their faces a mix of fear and confusion. The officers exchanged grim looks. One of them found a small phone wrapped in a sweater. It was cheap, disposable, taped shut at the back. Mark didn't need to hear the verdict. He could see it in the other officer's eyes when he muttered, "No SIM card. It's for coded calls." The woman began to sob, her voice cracking. "It's not what you think. I didn't want to. They made me. If I didn't do it, Her words dissolved into panic as officers restrained her, reading her rights in calm, professional tones. The crowd had fallen silent again, their earlier curiosity replaced by shock. Parents pulled their children closer. Strangers who had been walking past moments ago now stood still, realizing they had just witnessed the unraveling of something monstrous. That Mark's focus, however, stayed on Lily. The girl looked up at him, confusion written all over her small, tear-streaked face. "She said we were going to see Dad," she whispered. But she lied. The other kids never came back. The words hit like a punch to the chest. Mark crouched, meeting her eyes. "You did the right thing," he said softly. "You were very brave." Rex nuzzled her hand gently, the tension in his body easing now that the danger had passed. The girl's tiny hand rested against his fur, gripping it like it was the only safe thing she had known for weeks. Within minutes, the woman, whose real name was soon discovered to be Dana Voss, was taken into custody. She wasn't Lily's mother. She wasn't related to any of the children in the photos. She was part of a trafficking network that used fake families to move children across state lines. What had started as a silent signal in a crowded station had uncovered a nightmare spanning multiple cities. The police sealed off the area, investigators swarming the scene, collecting evidence. The news spread fast, whispers turning to astonishment as realization sank in. A dog's instinct had stopped something horrific from continuing. Hours later, the security office glowed under the harsh white lights of an ongoing investigation. Papers covered the desks, radios crackled with updates, and the air carried a mix of tension and exhaustion. Mark stood near the glass window, watching as detectives questioned Dana. Her confident mask had shattered. She looked small now, hunched, shaking, her eyes darting around the room like a trapped animal. Across from her, an investigator's tone remained calm, but his words were cutting through lies like a blade. Mark didn't need to listen. He knew the truth. Beside him, Rex lay quietly, his breathing slow, his eyes still trained on the woman through the glass. Never letting his guard down, that a senior investigator entered the room, holding a thick folder. "Her name's confirmed," he said grimly. "Dana Voss. Multiple aliases. She's been on a watch list in 3 states. The IDs and passports match an active trafficking network. They move children by train, pretending to be families." The weight of it hung heavy in the air. Mark rubbed his jaw, trying to process it all. "So Lily," the investigator nodded, "reported missing 3 weeks ago. Her real parents have been searching nonstop." Mark's heart sank. He looked at Rex, lying steady, loyal, still alert even after hours. The dog had known long before anyone else that something was wrong. "You saved her," Mark whispered under his breath. Rex tilted his head slightly, amber eyes meeting his handlers with quiet understanding. It wasn't pride, it was purpose. By nightfall, the operation had grown. The phone found in Dana's bag had provided clues, encrypted messages, coordinates, contact points. The team traced one active signal to an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of the city. The room filled with movement. Maps spread, radios buzzing, officers gearing up. Mark stood by the command table, hand resting on Rex's back. "You ready, partner?" he murmured. Rex gave a quiet whine, his ears flicking forward. That was answer enough. When they reached the site, the night was cold and heavy with fog. Flashlights cut through the darkness as officers spread out across the derelict buildings. Mark unclipped Rex's leash. "Find them," he whispered. The dog moved instantly, nose to the ground, tail rigid, weaving through debris and dust. Every few seconds he paused, sniffing the air, following a trail invisible to anyone else. Then he stopped at a locked metal door and let out a deep, urgent bark. Mark's adrenaline surged. He signaled for backup. "Here," he shouted. The door was pried open with a metallic shriek. Inside, in the dim light of a single bulb, 5 children sat huddled together, thin, pale, terrified. The sight was enough to silence every officer present. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then a boy, maybe 10, whispered, "Are you the police?" Mark nodded, his voice thick. "You're safe now." Rex approached carefully, tail low, movements gentle. The children stared at him, their fear melting into awe. "He found us," one of them whispered. Within minutes, the warehouse was swarming with officers and paramedics. The children were wrapped in blankets, carried to waiting ambulances, and checked for injuries. Mark stood back, watching it all unfold. His heart pounded with relief, exhaustion, and pride. Beside him, Rex sat tall, his fur dusted with grime, eyes still scanning the perimeter, always watching. Later, when the children were reunited with their families, the scene softened. Lily spotted Rex across the lot and ran toward him, her parents just behind. She dropped to her knees, throwing her arms around the dog's neck. "You heard me when no one else did," she whispered into his fur. Rex stayed perfectly still, only his tail tapping lightly against the ground. Mark swallowed hard, blinking away the sting in his eyes that he knelt beside them, resting a hand on Rex's back. "He doesn't miss a thing," he said softly. "That's his gift." The girl smiled through tears, holding out something small, Rex's old K9 badge tag that Mark had given her earlier. "I'm keeping this," she said, "so I never forget him." As dawn began to paint the sky in soft gold, Mark stood outside the station with his partner beside him. The city was quiet again. The mission was over, but its echo would last forever. He looked down at Rex, whose eyes reflected the morning light. "You don't just protect lives," Mark said quietly. "You change them." Rex pressed his head lightly against his handler's leg, the gesture simple yet full of meaning. In that silence, it was clear. The world was safer because one loyal heart had listened to a whisper no one else could hear.